We haven't done one of these in a while. It's the top 10 returns. And you could probably gather that if you're watching on YouTube and you've got my co-host background in your face. But nevertheless, it's the Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast. It is our top 10 greatest dream matches that have never happened. An interesting one. For that, I am joined by Mr. AEW wearing his Bullet Club band, well, Bullet Club stuff. Nothing to do with the fact that we're meeting a few members of the Bullet Club on Sunday this week. Mr. Dave Robinson, happy Monday.
Happy Monday, mate. How you doing?
It's Monday. I think that's about as good as it can get on a
Yeah.
Monday. But yes, fully refreshed from holiday and back on the tools, so to speak.
This this was a hard one to put together, mate. This was.
It was.
And obviously, I think you were checking as well certain matches. We thought, have they happened or haven't
Yeah.
they happened? Why didn't they happen? And then, like, because what I've tried to do is 10 matches that were possible. Not 10 matches that could have never happened. Like,
Mm.
different time periods and stuff like that. People that weren't active performers. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into it, mate.
Yeah, me too. I've got one that's probably time-wise wouldn't happen.
Okay.
But I feel as if maybe two. I've got quite a few honourable mentions. And what I will say straight away before any AEW fans are watching, there's only a limited number of AEW guys on my list. That's nothing to do with tribalism. It is simply because the AEW's been around 5 years, WWE's been around 70 years. It's
Yeah, mine's the same, mate. I've got very few.
yeah,
AEW, possibly only one, maybe two.
yeah,
I haven't got any women's matches, and I want to kind of make a note on that because we're advocates for the women's matches, and we think they're doing a great job. But
yeah,
the problem I've got is all the dream women's matches are actually happening now,
yeah,
because it's the best era in women's wrestling. So, like, we've got Sasha versus Britt Baker at the weekend.
yeah,
Yeah, those are the type of dream matches that I'd want to be putting on the list. So, I know there's probably a couple that could have been done, but even Trish and Lita are still kind of making appearances and they're still,
yeah,
like to have more matches. So yeah, it's not the fact that I wouldn't want any women's match on the list. I absolutely did, but they're not. It was just, yeah, different era, different times. And as I say, the women's matches are happening like week in, week out at the minute. So these are all matches like Attitude Era or historically over the last 20 years, matches that just didn't take place. Most of them are singles. I've got one tag and I've got one multi-man.
good. Don't worry though, because I'm like you, I've got no women's matches on the list either. However, we do have some. I was going to say fan sent-ins, but they're wrestler sent in top tens, and some of them do have women's on there. So we're not, there's not none. It's just none from myself or Dave, but there is some from others that we'll get into. But just before we start top 10, Dave, when you look at these matches, what goes into your sort of, I don't know, what ticks your boxes for a dream match?
Um, I think your top tier guys, your main eventers, the faces of the company in many ways,
Mm.
whether that at a particular period in time, they were the top guys in WWE, WCW, people that were at the top of the card regardless.
Yeah.
Um, I think drawing power. I think people wanting to see those matches, people like the old pay-per-view model,
Mm.
wanting to spend their money off the premise of one match. And we know with wrestling cards, you look at SummerSlam, 6 or 7 matches, I think there was, and they
Yeah.
were all fantastic. But some pay-per-views, it's the main event, and everything else, like boxing, everything else is the undercard. And there's that one match that has drawn the eyes to the product and drawn the money. So it's wrestlers that are capable of getting that kind of attention and getting that kind of buzz.
Yeah, I like to just to add, I agree with everyone on those points, and also to add some kind of that some of the matches may not necessarily be the greatest in ring matches that we're
Oh
going
yeah.
to see, but it's more the fanfare around it. Sometimes it's the storylines around it, or some of even the way that the promos can be done to set the match up could even be something else. And then to add those two wrestlers into that mix just creates the dream.
Well, I think yeah, it's more so the characters, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because there's people on this list that I'm not a huge fan of from
yeah,
a pro wrestling standpoint.
mm,
As you said, I'm an AEW. Uh, fanatic, and I love the style of matches in AEW, but like when we spoke to Eric Bischoff in the past and others, WWE have made megastars,
Yeah.
and those megastars are the ones drawing the big money. And from a business point of view, that's why they've been so much more successful. So, yeah, I suppose my list is contradictory in terms of my enjoyment of wrestling. But it is what it is. Those are the big matches, and I think my 10 matches are, they're good contenders. They would all be WrestleMania level matches, I think, the majority.
Yeah, I think so. And I agree with my list as well. I think my list would be up there as well. Let's enough talking around the subject. Let's get on with it. Dave, what is your 10?
So we're doing back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So my first one, I didn't necessarily put them in an order, but they're not really. Yeah, I don't think that really matters. I think they're all on the same kind of level for me. My first one, my first multi-man match would be DX versus the NWO.
Okay. So we got a little bit of that at WrestleMania. We didn't get it in a match, but we got that
Yeah.
little bit around it, didn't we?
Yeah, I think like in their prime as well. So that period
Yeah.
when WWF at the time or DX invaded WCW, if we could have got some kind of match, and that was going back and forth. The DX members, because you got two variations of DX. You got
Yeah.
Triple H and Shawn Michaels,
Mhm.
and then you've got the Triple H, X-Pac, and the New Age Outlaws.
Yeah.
I think it would be those four up against four of the NWO guys, and that might have been the Wolfpack at the time. During that
Yeah.
period, might have been Nash, Sting, Luger, and Conan against that version of DX in some kind of one-off event during the Attitude Era. As you say, we've retrospectively seen like little tributes and little bits and pieces at
Yeah.
WrestleMania when they're past the prime. But I think it would have been great if business could have been done during the Attitude Era to kind of give us. I mean, that would have been insane, wouldn't it? DX versus NWO. So yeah, that's my only multi-man match, but that's one I wanted to get in there.
Love that because I also love that what you could imagine the some of the promos that they could have, especially DX, they would have mugged off NWO with their dress ups and whatnot. And
Yeah, yeah.
it'd been a that'd have been an interesting one. I'd like to have seen that. I would have loved to have seen it anyway. And we nearly said there's times you said when they're past their prime at WrestleMania. We obviously had the DX invasion when they went to Nitro, but obviously they didn't get let in the building. But
Yeah, and then you had NWO coming into WF when Vince
yeah,
kind of had to inject the company with cancer, or I remember that promo that he cut.
lethal dose of poison.
Yeah, the poison, that was it. And that was like Nash, Hall, and Hogan. That was the
Yeah,
original iteration of the NWO. Um, so we have seen the NWO in WWE, obviously, but just during that time period when it was red hot, when it was the Monday Night Wars, if something could have been done, and I mean, that's a whole different podcast, I suppose, the matches that could have gone on that card. But as you say, you got the DX dressing up and the doing like the mocking of NWO potentially. You got the NWO beatdowns because there was so many people in the NWO at different times. So,
yeah.
I know I think there's a lot of fun to be had in kind of in booking that. But yeah, I'd have liked to have seen it, but obviously never going to happen.
No, definitely not. But yes, I would have loved to have seen that as well. My match at the bottom, as you said, it's difficult. I think my number one is number one, if that makes sense. The rest of them pretty sort of, list could be moved or shaped around. The number 10 on my list is a teacher versus student. And I've gone for Shawn Michaels versus Bryan Danielson as
Yeah.
a man. I did have to double check, as you said, when we're talking about making sure these matches have never. I know they teased it a little bit on WWE when Danielson was going again. It was the Authority and stuff like that. I know Shawn even cost him a match. I think Danielson put him in a label lock at one point. But I just think from a match perspective, there's obviously a story build it as well. This is a teacher versus student. Bryan Danielson was, I believe, Shawn Michaels, one of the students in Shawn Michaels wrestling school. So there was that bit about it. They could have added the authority bit on. For me, these two, just though Shawn in his prime, Danielson in his prime, you could have just sat there, put your feet up, and just enjoyed some really good wrestling.
Yeah, yeah, it was one. Danielson's made my list twice. So that is one of the matches that's on mine. But yeah, it's a great shout. As you say, teacher versus student, a great story to go along with what would have been a great match. Um, yeah, I suppose I thought that may have happened at some point, but yeah, it just didn't. But had Michaels retired during that authority? kind of storyline, or
Yeah, I think he had done. Yeah, I think Taker had beaten him, Mark
yeah,
Atkinson, and obviously he come back for that disastrous match in Saudi Arabia. But
yeah.
yeah, he had done at that
If
point.
he'd have come back for one story, one match against Brian Danielson, Daniel Bryan, I think that would have been a lot better than the match that we got in Saudi Arabia.
Jeez, I think we could have, me and you could have had put on a match in Saudi Arabia better than
Yeah.
what they did. That's not a disrespect to them either at all. I'm going to go with my number nine or my next pick, and then I'll get you go with yours. My number nine is Land of the Giants. I've called it, and it's going. This was the match that was probably never going to happen because of time and time in where it was, which was Andre the Giant versus the Big Show.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when Big Show was introduced to WCW as the Giant, they actually introduced him as
Yeah,
Andre the Giant's son. I
yeah,
don't know if they got away with that, to be honest, because
no, no.
that was probably WWF at the time's intellectual property
Yeah,
in terms of Andre. So yeah, I don't know how they quite got away with that. And I think they dropped it fairly soon. I don't know if that was because of the threat of a lawsuit. Um, but yeah, obviously we got the Andre Battle Royal. I think Big Show won
yeah,
one of the first ones. I don't know
no,
if it
no, yeah,
was the first, yeah, one of the. I don't know if it was the first or the second one. But yeah, two big men, two of the biggest, probably the biggest.
yeah.
There's a couple of 7-footers. Um, but yeah, that would have been a huge match in more ways than one.
But I think also, as a, in ring wise, that would have probably been the shits. But in terms
Yeah.
of like, the magnitude, size,
Spectacle, yeah,
spectacle. I mean, with Big Show and Aki Bono that time at WrestleMania when I was there at WrestleMania 21, my first WrestleMania, I saw a sumo wrestling match. But from a spectacle perspective, that would have just been, the two biggest of big men going against each other in a high, it would have been hard hitting, if anything else.
yeah, absolutely, mate, absolutely, yeah, good one.
Go
I'll do,
ahead.
yeah. My nine is the match that pretty much everybody watching this podcast is going to be expecting to see. When I mentioned to my dad that we're doing a top 10 matches that never happened, he said this one straight away. And that would have been Sting versus The Undertaker.
It's on my list.
Yeah. I mean, it was still rumored to be possibly happening right at the end of Undertaker's career.
Yeah.
Even when Sting had kind of been in the company and he had a few matches, it was still kind of a potential for the Undertaker's last match. The time period I would have liked to have seen it though was after WCW closed. You know,
Yeah.
I know Sting went to TNA, but during that period, the mid 2000s, maybe up to about 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
Think up to and including that period, I think we would have got the best Undertaker versus Sting match possible. I think it would have been better than what could have happened, 99, 2000, because I think, you saw some of Undertaker's matches. You saw Sting's last run in AEW that was pretty good, although he was like protected,
Yeah.
uh, and they did a good job of hiding his weaknesses. Not
You're
that
a
you,
crazy bastard.
yeah, exactly. But I think if we could have got something during that period when WCW had gone, after the invasion angle had all kind of all the dust had settled on that, if we could have got a match where Undertaker is in the middle of his streak still, the streak was going stronger, can anybody do it? To bring Sting in, to see him in the rafters, on Raw, and build up something over a few months, which led to a match at WrestleMania, while those guys were both in their prime. Um, I think that's something that wrestling fans will forever wish could have happened.
Definitely wish I would say it's on my list. It's a bit higher up, which we'll get into in a minute. But yeah, I agree. I would have loved to have seen that, and I'll add my 2 cents in when it comes to my match. But what about your number eight?
I've gone for a match that again during that invasion period there was different variations of matches that we got, and we arguably didn't get some of the biggest matches that
Yeah,
were on offer. And when we looked at the Monday Night Wars, um, you looked at Stone Cold on the WWF side, and I think the man that you kind of associate with WCW during that period in terms of World Heavyweight Champion was Goldberg.
yeah.
And we never got that one-on-one match. And it was
Well,
something that, they were very similar in their look. They both wore black trunks and both had bald heads and goatees. And they were the faces of their respective companies, sorry. Um, and I know we got Stone Cold's involvement in the Goldberg Lesnar match as the special guest
Yeah.
referee. I don't know if Goldberg possibly had a stunner during the time. I would expect he probably did because everybody
He'll
did.
get one in that match.
Maybe, yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've watched it, but we got Stone Cold versus Scott Hall,
Yeah.
and we got Goldberg versus The Rock.
Hmm.
Never got Goldberg versus Stone Cold, and I think that would have done big business.
Yeah, interesting. I think you're probably right. It's not on my list, but it was on my honorable mention list. But yeah, I agree. I mean, that match could have graced any stage, really,
Yeah.
in wrestling. That is a big, big match to have had. As I said, perhaps the in-ring quality of that isn't necessarily, but when you get Austin and Goldberg again, it's that whole Rock Hogan thing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It would have been just a fight. I mean, we saw Stone Cold versus Kevin Owens a couple of years ago, and I thought
Yeah,
that was pretty good given the,
yeah.
advancing age of Stone Cold, and definitely not in his prime anymore. But I thought it was a really good match or a really good fight. I don't know if it was actually. I don't know if the bell actually rang during that. I think it did, didn't it?
Yeah, it did ring.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, Stone Cold Goldberg. It wasn't going to be a technical masterclass. I don't know how many stars Meltzer would have given it. But in terms of a main event to a huge wrestling show, it ticks all the boxes.
It definitely does, yeah. It might not have been a long match either. We know
No.
Goldberg after, a certain amount of time. But yeah, magnitude, the build around it, even just that bit where Goldberg's maybe like, I don't know, he said he hasn't got a challenge for WrestleMania or something like that, and then bang, the glass. That reaction for that alone is
Yeah,
pay-per-view worthy just itself.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That would there's so much they could have done. As I say, there was the different time frames, but they were both very active during each
Yeah.
other's career. It just never aligned, did it? Just never aligned, whether that was injuries, whether that was, Stone Cold had stepped away, Goldberg stepped away, and when each one of them came back, the other one wasn't there. But yeah, it was definitely, I'm sure it could have happened. I'm sure there were conversations about it happening, but it just never came off.
No, it didn't, but I'd love to have seen it. Uh, my one is the next one with Mr. Danielson involved in it, my eight, and that would have been against Kurt Angle. Now, I,
I've
I,
I've got
I,
that.
I had to do my research on this to make sure because I thinking, did it happen somewhere, and I hadn't seen it. And
Yeah,
I saw an interview with Danielson in 2023, and it's a match that he'd said that he'd never had that he wanted. And I just think from a standpoint of if we're talking wrestling, it didn't need promos. It's not one of those matches where you wouldn't the build to it wouldn't have necessarily have been like, oh my, it wouldn't have got the same type of build as a Rock Hogan or an Austin Rock or whatever. But it from a match perspective, if you wanted some of the best wrestling in the world, you just put them two in there. And I said it before, you'd stick your feet up, get your popcorn out, and just have watch a great wrestling match.
yeah, would have been one of the great. I mean, you could even go Iron Man or something like that. We
That's
with
my next choice afterwards. My next pick.
yeah, get into stipulations, but yeah, it made my list. As I say, that was one of two Danielson matches that I've got on mine. One of them being against Kurt Angle. I just think that would have been just absolutely epic.
Kurt Angle in his prime as well. Let's bring that in
Yeah,
there.
Kurt in his prime, Danielson arguably still in his prime, never not been in his prime. But yeah, at any point over the last 20 years, when Kurt was in his prime, that would have been great to see. And it wouldn't have necessarily had to be for the title either. It's a main event. Some matches are main events even if they don't go on last. And I
Yeah,
think that is an example of one of those.
exactly that. I will go on to my next one, my seven, which I was going to say is going to be an Iron Man match. It was my only gimmick match on the card, and it is Kurt Angle again, but this time he's going to be in an Iron Man match with Bret Hart or a submission match with Bret.
Yeah, it's a great show. Great show. The problem I had with Bret Hart was obviously his career ended
Yes,
around 2001, I want to say.
something along those lines.
Yeah, when he got the kick from Goldberg and he didn't. I know he came back and had the match, if you like, with Vince.
Yeah.
Yeah, the least said about that, the better. But yeah, my problem with getting Brett in was like obviously he had a lot of dream matches at the time, and pretty much everyone I wanted to see did face. And then
Yeah.
retrospectively, since 2001, um, you know. the guys that have come along, they weren't competing around the same time.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean, Bret Hart, I could put Bret Hart against anybody, like your Kenny Omegas, your Ortons, even your Cenas. You know,
yeah,
there's so many matches there, but unfortunately, because Bret had to retire so early, there was never a realistic possibility of those matches happening.
mm,
But yeah, that Iron Man match would have been something, and with Kurt, that could have happened because Kurt debuted in '99, was it?
yeah. 2000, something like that. Yeah.
99, 2000 when he came in against Taz at the Rumble. So they were both active, albeit Brett was in WCW, Kurt was in WWF at the time. So yeah, that could have happened. That yeah, great one. Great
Or a
one.
submission match, one of the two. Could have, they were both technically gifted, weren't they? So
Yeah, 2 out of 3.
yeah,
You know, yeah, the options are limitless really in regards to that. Um, one I've got again, which I think could have happened, was HBK versus AJ Styles.
I've got that higher up my list. But yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I think you could call AJ, particularly in his prime, probably when he first landed in WWE. Um, the phenomenal one. He was the person that The Undertaker had his last match against, and I think that speaks volumes. And then you got HBK, the showstopper, the guy that's kind of remembered as Mr. WrestleMania, probably the best in-ring performer of all times, many people would say. So I think if those two guys could have got into a program, that could have been sensational in the ring and from a story point of view. I think that would have been really good.
yeah. I mean, you had that. I mean, it nearly happened. It nearly happened at a Royal Rumble. Can't remember the year, but I know there was even some mock-up posters that were getting.
Well,
Yeah, I can't remember the year, but anyway, Shawn Michaels didn't do it. It goes up my list. It's on my list up there for sure. It's a bit higher up. It's not far up, not far up away. Only a couple of
yeah.
numbers. I know yours ain't in an order as such, but yeah, it's a bit further. Literally two above. So we got one more, and then I've got that match. So I'll save my bit for that. But what was your next one after that?
I think if I would have done an order, it would have been top three
Yeah.
probably. My next one I've got a tag match,
Okay.
and again, this would have not been great from an in-ring point of view, I don't think. But I think the spectacle of it again, I think if you imagine the posters, if you imagine the promo packages that have been put together, and that would have been the outsiders of Scott Hall and Kevin Nash against the Brothers of Destruction,
Oh.
Undertaker, Kane.
Mm.
Again, not going to be a master class in technical wrestling, but in terms of four characters, pivotal to
Yeah.
that period as well. Attitude Era, Monday Night Wars, everything that happened in terms of WCW, the NWO, the two guys that stayed with WWF, WWE, throughout. I think
Yeah.
Undertaker did have opportunity to go over to WCW and he didn't. He stayed with Vince, he stayed
Yeah.
with the WWE. Um, and then the two guys that changed the industry forever in kind of what they did, the money that then became, commonplace for wrestlers to earn, the guaranteed contracts, and all the rest of the history. I think Outsiders versus Brothers of Destruction would have been something that a lot of fans wanted to see.
Yeah, I would have loved that. That would have been very, as you say, match quality wise, probably not there. Although Scott Hall wasn't a slouch. Uh,
No, Scott was good.
yeah,
He
but
had his work cut out for him though.
yeah, but yeah, it would have been a great spectacle for sure. I would have loved to do that. The next one, what I'm gonna do is we're gonna do this one, then I'm gonna do a couple of our send-ins, and then we'll get on to our top five. The next one we've already spoken about for me. It was Undertaker Sting. I put that in there as my six, if I was doing a number. Again, it kind of has everything, doesn't it? It had the build, it would have had the great build. You could have had a couple of mysterious, even the mind games that they played, they could have played on each other as well. You could have had all of that. The match itself would have actually been good. I mean, I wouldn't say would it have been up to the top of the excellent pile, probably not, but it would have been sort of, at the top level.
Yeah. I look at it and think, could it compete with like the HBK Undertaker matches?
Yeah.
I think it's Sting in his prime and Undertaker in his prime. It could have been in that conversation.
Yeah.
HBK, as we just said, probably greatest in-ring performer of all time.
Yeah.
Um, he's certainly in the top three or four. So, but yeah, I still think that would have been a great match and something that fans would have spoken about for a long time, but maybe they'll talk about it for even longer, the fact that it didn't happen.
Yeah, probably so. I think so. I would have loved to have seen it. I just think when I know there was that potential, I think it was 27 when they were hit. Yeah, when they were hitting it, and it turned out to be Triple H that would come back to face the Undertaker because he just retired Shawn. But even when they were doing sort of some promo packages for that, they was even leaving little scorpion towels on the twos, and you're like shit. And there was like some of the bits that you were seeing were reminiscent of what Sting was doing in WCW, and you were
Okay.
just thinking, oh, is this going to be the moment when it was Sting, and it turned out to be Triple H. So I don't know if there. I can't remember if Sting talked about it, but he did say that there was at one time before he joined the WWE when they were very close to getting him to come to WWE anyway. And then he chose, I think he may have chose to re-sign with TNA at that point. Because he was more like better the devil you know, and he basically just didn't want his career to be tarnished by going to WWE and then to jobbing out every 5 minutes. I think that was his concern.
And the thing is, it very nearly was. I
Yeah,
know his introduction to WWE was pretty good.
yeah,
Uh, that moment, was it at the Survivor Series
yeah,
when he came down? But he went on, he had a match with Triple H at WrestleMania that
yeah,
again had involvement from DX and NWO, which he lost,
yeah,
which should never have lost. He also had the match with Rollins, which he lost, and maybe, he wasn't going to win the WWE title at the time during that, but
yeah,
he didn't really have any significant victories. Um, it wasn't a particularly memorable run, although it was a memorable debut.
yeah.
So I think he was probably right having those reservations, to be honest, and maybe for his longevity and what he went on to achieve in AEW, the run in TNA was the right thing for him.
Yeah, I think so. I think he made the right choice, to be honest with you, for sure on that. Yeah, I don't think he would have. I think WWE the get my words out. The good thing that WWE was good at was making the WCW's top talent look crap. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah. There's a few that kind of managed to push themselves on. I think
yeah,
Booker T, one of them. He really kind of elevated
yeah,
himself and pushed himself to the next level. But there weren't too many that you look at Page, like one of my honorable mentions actually, DDP versus Randy Orton.
yeah,
Um, the RKO was obviously a version of the Diamond Cutter, and I
yeah,
think DDP actually gifted it to Orton, or there was a conversation
yeah,
where he kind of passed the move to him, or something along those lines. But if you look at Page's WWE run, that's not a match that could make this list really. You look at Page in WCW, and he was a top guy, two-time I think WCW champion.
yeah.
Um, but that just didn't translate to his WWE run. So I don't think there would have been a huge clamoring for that match, which is why it only makes my honourable mentions.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. Of course, we're going to get into Smashing Mike's top 10 in a minute. Our former champion sent in a list, but I would have to shout out the Ringside Renaissance podcast because these were the ones that come up with this top 10. They tweeted out about greatest dream matches that never happened, and I was like, that is a top 10 that
Yeah,
we needed to. So big shout out to Jesse and Andy. And as a reward, you are coming on the top 10 debuts. So you'll be joining me as a reward for your addition to our top 10. I don't know if you want to call it a reward or a hit or a nightmare for you guys coming on the show again. But big shout out to you guys. So thanks for the top 10 addition to our top 10 program. We enjoy these top 10s. They are abundance of fun. But let's get into Smashing Mike's picks. Quite interesting because we're talking about women as well, and he's got a few on here. No particular order. I'm just going to read them off. The first one, I'm just getting it out of the way. Samoa Joe, Chris Benoit.
yeah.
Interesting.
Ben Benoit makes my top five. To be honest, I've had to compartmentalize him as a performer and the tragedy that
Yeah,
happened. But yeah, that would have been some match as well.
yeah. He's got Brian Danielson, Dean Malenko.
Yeah,
Interesting. Bret Hart, Kurt Angle, which we've already said, I think.
yeah,
Yeah. No. Yes. Yeah, we did.
yeah.
Okay, so he's got two women's matches. Why is it there's always Japanese wrestlers, and you know that I'm going to struggle with some of these. So first one was quite easy. It's Io Sky versus Manima Toyota. And
Yeah,
he's got Sasha Banks and Gal Kim.
yeah, yeah.
It's an interesting one. Okada versus Misawa. Kobayashi versus Tanahashi, Mike.
Tanahashi, yeah.
Yeah, Tanahashi. Then he's got an interesting one. The Rock versus DDP.
Okay. So,
Interesting, interesting. I mean,
but I
again,
think
this is no particular order, so this doesn't necessarily mean it's his third choice. It was just
well that's an interesting one as well. I know I just spoke about DDP, but he was for a time considered the people's champion in WCW, and The Rock obviously
Mhm.
wasn't the people's champion.
Mhm.
So I think during that time frame, that would have been something. Maybe on that pay-per-view we spoke about right at the very start, if during the Monday Night Wars they could have collaborated on a show,
Yeah,
that's certainly one that could have been spoken about.
and of course, Mike is the people's champion of Ignite.
Exactly. It's all links together.
It's all linked together, right? AJ Styles, Eddie Guerrero,
Yeah. I
and
like that.
finally on his list. And do you know what? I didn't even think about it, and I wasn't sure if it had been done, but then I realized it hadn't because they were in separate companies. Shawn Michaels versus Brian Pillman.
Yeah, that's one that I thought would have happened at some point, but yeah, must not.
Interesting, interesting
That's really
choice.
good. I like his Gail Kim inclusion as well.
Yeah,
She's someone that was a little bit before her time in terms. I know had some great matches. She had some great matches in TNA. But I think about Gail Kim now going up against the likes of Sasha, Charlotte, Becky, Bailey. You know those. Yeah, yeah. I think Gail Kim could have been a real top women's star. And although she had a good career, and you know, Mike's obviously got her in his list, I think if she would came along a little bit later, she could have been a potential megastar. She was really good.
yeah, indeed, she could have been. So that was Mike's list. Now we're getting on to the top five. I'll start with one because again, it was one I believe you may have already mentioned. It was AJ Styles, Shawn Michaels, which was what you said earlier on. Match. I mean, that had again. If you look at the in ring of those two, brilliant. Promos would have been okay. I don't necessarily think it would have. You wouldn't have sold that match on a promo, but you would have just sold it just because of how good those two are in the ring.
Yeah, yeah, it would have been, you know, as you say, if there was a rumor or a potential that it may have happened and then just couldn't quite get it over the line or just didn't, you know, just didn't line up. But yeah, it would have been an incredible match. Um, you know, it could have headlined any main event, and one of those matches as well, with or without the title,
Yeah,
would have been one of the top matches. Would have been a marquee match that would have sold a lot of tickets.
definitely would have done for sure. Who is your five?
Well, I've ticked off six here, so because I've already talked about one, but we can do that. I can just re-mention that again. It was one of yours, and it was Kurt Angle versus Danielson.
Hmm.
Um, so if I move on to my next one, which is Danielson again,
Yeah.
up against Benoit.
Ah, brilliant.
Benoit Danielson. I think that would have been, from a match point of view, that
Yeah,
that would have been just incredible. And as I say, we can't just you know ignore what happened. But
no,
if we look at Chris Benoit's wrestling career and his ability as a wrestler, he was right up there as one of the best. He'll never, and perhaps rightly so, get full plaudits and stuff because of what happened. Um, but if we're just looking at you know matches that we saw on television, you know, just as fans that just watch wrestling week in, week out, I think you're struggling to find two better performers than Benoit and Danielson. I think they could have had just an epic match.
yeah, it would have been brilliant. Those two would have just tore the absolute house down. I would have loved to have seen that match in there. It would have been well, yeah, yeah. As you say, you have to put to the side the Benoit stuff outside of wrestling and focus on Benoit. And he was one of the best to ever do it. There's no doubt about that.
My difficulty is, you know, I would never want to be disrespectful to the family,
Yeah.
you know, of of his late son and wife,
Mm.
in kind of giving him plaudits or praising him,
Yeah.
given what happened. But I know there are different investigations and circumstances and head trauma and that's not the conversation for now.
No.
But I don't think it's something that we can't mention. I think we've got to kind of, put a little bit of a asterisk on it or disclaimer and say,
Yeah.
look, not kind of condoning anything that happened, or of course, who could. But in terms of just a performer, in terms
Yeah.
of wrestlers and wrestling matches, I think that would have been one hell of a wrestling match.
Oh, he would have been brilliant. He was one of the best wrestlers. There's no doubt in any. I don't think anyone would take that away from him. You can take a lot away from him, but the one thing you can't take away is how good of an in-ring competitor
Yeah, well,
he was. My next one is actually another one involving HBK. And this time it's Shawn Michaels in a match that I can't believe we never got because they were in the WWE at the same time. He may have even been a referee for one of his matches at the time, but they never got one-on-one. Was Shawn Michaels versus The Rock.
yeah, that is a surprise.
It
That
never
is,
happened one-on-one. He was a, as I say, I know he was definitely a referee for a match, but he never wrestled one-on-one against the Great One. And I think you could incorporate promos into that as much as you could the in-ring.
yeah. It's surprising it didn't happen either on like The Rock's rise, like even when he
Yeah.
came into the company during that period when
Mhm.
when Shawn was one of the top guys.
Yeah.
Um, I know after the match with Stone Cold, he disappeared for a while because of his
Yeah.
neck injuries and stuff that was going on in his personal life. But yeah, you would have expected that to have happened at some point. Again, the best time for it to happen would have been, during the mid 2000s, perhaps before or during The Rock when he was first, drifting off to Hollywood, during that period, the period of time when he faced Hogan
Yeah.
and Goldberg, a match against Shawn Michaels would have been, I'm really surprised I didn't think of that myself, and I'm surprised, even more surprised that it didn't happen.
Yeah, it would have been a really good one for me anyway. I would have loved that match. But what one's on your list next?
Well, I've done two of my top five, so I've got three left, but
Yeah,
I'll give one of my honorable mentions. And
yeah,
I
go
thought
for it.
I had got a women's match in there, but it had already happened in NXT, and that was the Four Horsewomen.
Yeah.
Sasha, Bailey, Charlotte, Becky. Um, but yeah, that match did happen at a takeover. I think in the future it could be a great match to be on a main card somewhere. Should Sasha Mercedes find her way back to the WWE at some point, and
Hmm.
everyone else is still there. Because we never got that on the main roster, if you like. So yeah, I nearly got a women's match on there, but it had already happened. My third, I've got three left.
Hmm.
Kenny Omega. Right. So these are three matches now. My top three are matches that could happen. Three and two probably won't. Number one probably will. Um, Kenny Omega versus Randy Orton.
Oh, yeah.
I just think Kenny is like in many ways the king of the indies. He's one wrestler
Yeah.
that's never been to the WWE and likely probably won't now.
Hmm.
And Orton has always been in the WWE.
Yes.
He's never He's never had a match on the Indies, probably never will. Has never had to, and that's
Yeah.
great. And he's always been quite vocal of his style and what needs to be done and what's necessary, and the stuff that wrestlers do on the Indies which aren't necessary, and it isn't good storytelling. I just think that would be a fascinating, great match. Even now, Orton, coming towards the end of his career.
Hmm.
I I still think that match could be something huge. Probably won't happen. He probably would have been best in ring probably 5 or 6 years ago. But yeah, it's a match. Certainly for me as a big Kenny Omega fan, Randy Orton's one of the guys that would, if I was Kenny Omega and I got a top five list of guys I want to face that I've never faced before, I'm sure Kenny would put Randy on there.
I reckon that'd be an awesome match if it happened. As you rightfully say, it's probably never going to happen now, unfortunately. But listen, wrestling's a strange thing, right?
Yeah.
It is a crazy old. Who'd have thought Punk would have been back in WWE, which is actually quite nicely setting up to my top three. So my third on my list, and this is a match that could possibly still happen. It has, and it was even spoken about as early as this past weekend, whereas CM Punk basically said if this guy wants to get in the ring with him, he'll gladly put him to sleep. and that man was Stone Cold Steve Austin.
It's really fitting that it's featured there on your list because it's my number two.
Is
So
it?
a great opportunity to have a good chat about that one. We've got it at the same spot pretty much.
Yeah, it would have been a everything about it. It screams money. You've got the promo side. You've got, you know, even the fact, Punk's one of the best in the world. You had Austin, who was literally the biggest ass kicker in the WWE. It needed, and I still want to see it. I mean, Austin's in great shape. I don't know if you saw the picture of him this weekend. Jesus, he's jacked the fuck. I would still want to see it now. If they done that at WrestleMania next year, that would be one of the matches where if I was not tempted to go already that might tip me over the edge of wanting to go and watch another WrestleMania in America.
Yeah, same. And I think it will happen. I really
Good.
do think it will because, as you say, Stone Cold's still in incredible shape. We saw him a couple of years ago in Kevin Owens
Yeah.
and gave a great account of himself. Punk has never been like the most phenomenal wrestler, bell to bell, but from a character point of view and some of the matches that he's had and some of the stories he's been involved with, I think one with Stone Cold could be absolutely legendary. And I do think we've got a good chance of seeing it. Probably like 60-40 chance in favor of seeing it would be my kind of prediction on it. Um, but yeah, in terms of matches that are on the table that have never happened that could happen, before it's too late, before Stone Cold fully retires and says, "That's it, I'm never wrestling again," before Punk gets to that stage himself, I think they've got to try and do whatever it takes for that match to happen. I wouldn't have thought it's going to be financial. Um, I'm not sure what the what things would stop that match from happening. I would expect it to be more Stone Cold side though. I
Yeah.
would I would expect Punk is there. He's an active competitor. He's under contract. Um, he's already stated he'd be well up for doing it. We've seen him wear Stone Cold t-shirts. He was wearing a Stone Cold t-shirt when he hit the pipe bomb
Yeah.
all those years ago. Um, yeah, so I would expect the powers with Stone Cold. If he wants to do it, then that can everything else can fall in place and it can happen.
It's got to happen. It's still got to happen for sure. I'll get onto my two because you've kind of already said that was your two. So, but it's
Yeah.
not. And these are two matches that my top two are really two sort of I would class as generational matches. So again, they could have happened. Both of these matches could have happened. It wouldn't have been, well, they both still wouldn't have been the greatest in ring just because of the people that are in there. But my second one on the list is a generational bout between Cena and Hogan.
Yeah.
I just think because of everything that Cena what was the mod it was the modern day Hulk Hogan to go against. As the match probably would have been the shits. But again, it's about that whole. You remember Rock and Rock and Hogan at WrestleMania looking either side and the crowd and everything about that. The draw that they both had on wrestling, they both made a ton of money from merchandise sales, and there was all of that sort of stuff to put together. Plus the magnitude of those names, Cena, Hogan, in there, and you just create. It would have just been amazing.
Yeah, and to be honest, could that still happen? Very unlikely. But we saw Ric Flair wrestle for like retirement last year, and I don't know whether I don't know what Hogan's physical condition. I know he wasn't in a good way, and he was having
Mm.
multiple surgeries.
Yeah.
But yeah, during the mid 2000s, even going into pre-COVID, how much of a possibility was it? And as you say, in terms of the best match, Hogan probably wasn't capable of having one of his best matches since Cena started in the industry. We're probably going back to the mid 90s to try and
Yeah.
get Hogan at his absolute prime in ring. But yeah, in terms of a spectacle, in terms of the characters, in terms of what they represent, and as you say, Hulk Hogan and the modern day Hulk Hogan for so long, um, yeah, that certainly could have main evented a WrestleMania.
It could have done. It could have done. Before we get to number one, I'm just going to go for a couple of my honorable mentions. I had Chad Gable versus Shawn Michaels versus Kurt Angle.
Yeah.
I had the Young Bucks versus the Rockers.
Okay.
An interesting one from a tag perspective.
I
Um,
had Young Bucks and my honorable mentions, and that would have been against the Usos, but
yeah,
still very much a match that would
yeah,
happen, perhaps.
yeah. And I also had Macho Man Randy Savage versus The Rock.
Yeah, yeah. What kind of time period would that have been around that time when, or
Yes.
was that one of them where you look at Macho Man at his best?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yes. So
It-
yeah, in if that would have actually happened, it probably wouldn't have lived up to what it, could have.
no,
Um,
exactly.
if both men were both at their peak. But
Yes.
yeah, yeah, there's a lot of those as well.
Yeah,
that
definitely.
we-
What about yours? Is there any your honorable mentions that you haven't mentioned yet?
No, I think I've mentioned them all. I did originally have Triple H Ric Flair on my list because I thought that was a match that didn't happen, but it did.
Yeah.
It happened at Taboo Tuesday of all places. And I think it was that period where Flair was the Intercontinental
When he
Champion.
loses, he retires. It started their retirement
Yeah,
run.
yeah, I think it was that run. So I think perhaps Triple H Ric Flair could have been a bigger match than just something that happened on that run.
Yeah.
Uh, Given the fact that he was Triple H's mentor and he looked up to him in Evolution and all the rest of it. So because we got that iconic match, Shawn Michaels versus Ric Flair, the retirement match, I think we could have had a similar, like quite an iconic match with Flair and Triple H as well. But no, I think that's all my honorable mentions, mate.
In that case, hit me with your number one.
My number one is a match that very nearly happened this year, and I think it would have drawn big money, but because of the story they'd been telling with another top guy, it kind of got changed, and there's been a documentary about it now as to what happened and why it didn't happen and why it had to change. But I still think it's a match that absolutely has to happen. I think they'll have to heat it up again in terms of a rivalry because they've kind of aligned themselves with each other for the time being.
Hmm.
That might change though, upon the return of one of them. So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I
The
do know.
Rock versus Roman Reigns. Um,
Yes.
head of the table, the tribal chief. There's so much that they um were kind of building towards for this year's WrestleMania. But again, with the story with Cody, that's what the fans wanted, and quite rightly so, to be honest. And I don't think Roman Rock needed the title.
They didn't.
So I think there is an opportunity to still do that match and have it even bigger and even better. It's going to take a while now because, as I said, they are kind of aligned. So, they might factor into everything we're seeing with the bloodline and the different factions and the different offshoots of the bloodline. But I still think The Rock versus Roman Reigns is a huge, huge main event. I think Roman's obviously in his prime. I think The Rock is always in good condition, always gives a good account of himself. Picked up a pinfall victory over Cody at WrestleMania Night 1, which will
Yeah.
obviously lead to a match with him and Cody down the line, perhaps Royal Rumble. But yeah, Rock Roman is something that I still want to see.
And I think we will still see it.
Yeah.
I think it's a dead set. In my opinion, and I think I said this when we was on the podcast before, I believe that match should have been done. They should have gone with it. But perhaps they could have got the belt off of Roman beforehand somehow. I don't know. Roman losing the title would have been a big thing, but they could have easily, I don't know, they could have done something where that match still, I mean, it would have left Cody in an interesting spot because he wouldn't have had a match, but I still think they should have gone with it. But they will. They will go for it. It will happen maybe next year.
I
Uh,
still think the mistake was I think Cody should have won the title the first year. I,
yeah.
I I know in retrospect, you could say it made Cody a bigger star, and I think he just delayed the inevitable. To be honest, I think most other guys in Cody's position, and I know it's a bit different because you had the Dusty story and everything. Most other guys, given that first year going into that main event, it would have been time to pull the trigger on that next top guy, which was Cody.
Yeah.
It just delayed it for a year and it kind of created their own problems. And we did get some good stuff with the bloodline, and it wasn't it was good content what we got for that year. But I think if we'd have had Cody win the title the first year and Rock Roman face off for the head of the table second year, I think that would have probably been the better way to go. But I'm not complaining. It's as you say, it's still going to happen more than likely at some point. So we're still going to get it. But yeah, I think that was a problem of their own creation in the way they booked the first year.
Definitely was, and yeah, we'll definitely get it for sure. My number one, we won't be getting it. I don't ever think it will happen now. Anyway, could have done perhaps, and maybe should have done. And again, we look at those moments in wrestling where where they set up the match and it happens, and you've got one of them in the ring, and the other one comes out to make the match happen. One of those moments, and that is Hulk Hogan versus Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah,
Arguably the two biggest guys in wrestling during the Attitude. Well, not even during the Attitude. Hogan was bigger before the Attitude Era, but when he went and created the NWO, all of that stuff. We did get Hogan Rock, which was obviously one of the dream matches that we wanted to get, and it lived up to expectation. It wasn't certainly for I better than what I was expecting it to be, even back then. But I just think if you had Hogan, I mean, I think it was WrestleMania 30. I think they done it where the Hogan come out messed up where they were from, and then Austin come out, and you were like, shit, what? This is what, and that reaction alone on that bit would have given you the idea as to how big of a match that was just from name value alone. The match itself probably wouldn't have pulled up any trees, but again, its magnitude, the clamor for tickets to be in that arena to see those two go like that and actually have a match would have just, I think it would have blown box office records for wrestling.
absolutely. And you just look back at Stone Cold run and how important it was for the wrestling industry, but it was only over about 5 year period, really. Five.
Mhm.
If Stone Cold could have had a more of a longer run, you look at that match with Hogan, should have happened, didn't happen. But even looking at like the modern day guy, or those ruthless aggression era, John Cena, Orton against Stone Cold, so much there that could have happened. But although we're still considering Stone Cold now for a match against Punk in
Yeah,
2024 or 2025, during that stage of the early 2000s, he was no longer an active member of the roster. But yeah, we got Rock versus Hogan. We should have definitely got Stone Cold versus Hogan as well.
they should have done. We were robbed, Dave. We were robbed. I tell you, what a list, what a man. I mean, this is all subjective. Everyone would have their own feelings and matches that they would like to add. And there's no wrong answer to this.
Yeah.
That's the beauty. It is just pure opinion based stuff.
What I enjoy like Mike's
Mm.
Japanese inclusions,
Yeah,
because I've said on this podcast up until recent times when AEW started working with New Japan, I'm not too clued up
yeah,
on Japan, but I know, the talent that you see, like even now, your Tanahashis and your Suzukis and obviously Okada coming in. There's some dream matches for Okada that, we haven't got on the list, but I'm sure we could have if we'd have had, if we'd have done a top,
20.
well, if we'd have done a top 10 on any other given day, we might have had Okada in there against the likes of Orton or something like that. So yeah, it's nice to get different opinions and different areas of expertise. I think me and we look at like Attitude Era and up to modern day,
Yeah,
and then we sprinkle of WCW, a sprinkle of AEW, a sprinkle of TNA.
yeah,
Uh, but yeah, to get Mike's additions as well from Japan, there's a lot of New Japan wrestlers that will be on a lot of people's lists.
yeah. Definitely so. And thanks, Mike, for that. And there was, I mean, Chris, the promoter of Ignite, sent in a few in, but they were ones that we'd already had. So there was, he would have just been adding to what we had already said. So I think he done like the Brett and the Brett angles and bits and pieces like that. So Chris had sent the list in as well, but we had covered them off during,
Yeah,
the
like I was thinking about like Brett and Owen against Edge and Christian, and there was all
oh
sorts of
yeah,
things. There were so many, but I just
Hardys as
sorry.
well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's just it's endless. It's a conversation that could never end. You could never get every match type. You got
No.
stipulations. You've got there's all sorts. So to narrow it down just to 10 matches, I think we've both done pretty well to
Yeah,
get a list out. But yeah, it is subjective. There's certain matches that people will go, yeah, that's a match that should have happened. There's others where people go, what? That I would never want to see. Game sizes against the Brothers of Destruction. but you know, for a certain period of time, I think it would have done
Yeah,
quite well. So
I
anyway,
think so.
all to their own list, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly that. Everyone's got their own opinions. Everyone's got their own lists, which all are right, by the way. We're not, they're all right. It's been a ton of fun doing this. I love the top tens. We don't do enough of them anymore. We went through a stage of doing a load. We don't do enough. I've got another one coming up with the Ringside Renaissance team. It's a busy week for us, not just because of the fact that we are both attending All In this weekend as well, which we're very much looking forward to. Lots of stuff kind of podcast. If you're an NWA fan, we have two of the biggest women's wrestlers in the NWA, Kenzie and Kylie Page, coming up on the show this week as well. Also, a very special what do we call it? What do I call him now? I'm collaborating again. Sorry, that's the word. Not just with Ringside Renaissance. I'm collaborating with one of the top streamers in America for wrestling. Anyway, that would be Conman. If you haven't seen it, go Conman167 on TikTok or and all over the place, and you'll see his reactions to things, which is very important and very good. And he's been, WWE, I think, have looked after him a couple of times. I know TNA, and he was recently streaming Progress, the most recent Progress show. Good luck for that, because that was 5.5 hours long, my friend. So you get some kudos from me for doing that for sure. Obviously, review shows are back. All In predictions will be back, and although there's not the cards not fully there yet, but the predictions for All In as well. We'll be having the fun and games with that. But Dave, it's always good having you on these shows, whether we're doing review shows, interviews, or things like this. It's always good to have you on. I will look forward to seeing you, obviously, at All In. We'll get a picture for you all to see that we do still see each other, so that we'll be having a picture of us together, getting the band back together, so to speak, this week.
That's it, right. Looking forward to seeing you. Looking forward to getting some more top tens done as well. It's been a really, really fun conversation.
Yeah.
And yeah, it'd be great if we can get an all in prediction show before then, and obviously we'll talk about it afterwards as well. The aftermath of all in. Danielson's career. I know I was away this week, so I can jump on the Dynamite review with you, but I thought that video package
Mm.
was, I know everybody's talking about it, and Green Day,
Yeah.
good riddance playing. I just thought it was absolute perfect. I think AEW have done a number of good
Yeah.
promo packages over the years, but I think that's one of their best ones. And yeah, I'm at the point where well, we'll talk about it on the prediction show, but I certainly think that Swerve Danielson main event is going to be something pretty special.
It will be, and we'll be there live to see it as well, which makes it even sweeter when you're there in person to watch. Keep a lookout on us at HCT Buckle on X. Yeah, it's X. Yeah, hitting the Turnbuckle podcast all over social media platforms. And usually Dave gets to serenade us, but it's not AEW today. It is the top 10. So you have been watching the top 10 on the Hitting the Turnbuckle channel with the problem child himself, Mr. Dave Robinson, with me, Adam Cousins. And until next time, everybody, buckle down, stay safe, and goodbye.